Okay, 6 o'clock, why don't we get started? So, I wanted to go back over what we talked about last week. Just to start. And we have different varieties of the cannabis plant, whether it has THC dominant or not. They're either Ruderalius, sativa, or indica. Now, this one is relatively new. What this is this is an autoflower that is not time sensitive. So what happens is once the seed emerges, in 72 days, it will be done completely with its cycle. Day 14, it'll start flowering. Tiny little plant, start flowering at day 14. So very particular plant. Don't have a lot of room for error with an autoflower. Very finicky plant, because if you screw up, it doesn't have time to recover. Stunts its growth. Okay, so if we're doing a Ridelius autoflower, there's also a newer one, which is called a fast version or a quickie, they call it. It's not a photo period, but it goes about 95 days. Okay, so it's a newer genetic. There's a lot of, obviously, because of cannabis becoming more and more popular worldwide, there's tons and tons of breeding going on where people are always working with the plant and expanding what we can get as far as expression goes in the plant. And that's why the neat part is that now, let's talk about the different cannabinoids that we can get in our plants. THC we know of, right? But let me also explain something. All of the cannabinoids, when they are on the plant, in the plant form, have an A after them, in the acidic form. THCA, and then when THCA gets heated, it goes from the less stable THCA to becoming THC. It goes from being non-psychotropic to being psychotropic. If you took a THC flower off the plant and ate it, it would be the most flavorful thing you've ever eaten, but you wouldn't get high from it. Whereas if you took that same bud and put it in some heat for a period of time, probably less hour, maybe 140 degrees, 50 degrees, the THCA will convert to THC and become psychotropic. So a quick story, 2 researchers were using THCA. They were using it for their own research. They were trying to enhance their cancer fighting ability and anti-inflammatory. They had a tincture. They had a tincture beside their bed. One day they took it. They both looked at each other and go, I feel psychotropic. So do I. So the next day they said, okay, what's going on? They found that during the day, the sunlight came in, hit that little bottle that was brown, and it heated up enough to convert the THCA to THC delta 9. And then it becomes psychotropic. Okay? Both have different effects on the human body because they both hit different receptors throughout the body. So we have all these little receptors throughout the body, and THCA, non-psychotropic, hits the receptors differently than THC does. So it's used a lot. THC is used a lot in the medical industry. It's used for anti-inflammatory, anti-pain. It's also used for helping the body trigger its cancer fighting abilities. So all of those things are possible. But again, if you treat it properly, you can keep it in the THCA form if you like. Same thing with all of these other cannabinoids. So CBD, that comes in CBDA. CBDVA. So really interesting, because now we're learning more about these functions here and how they affect the human body. We're finding that the A can be 10 times more powerful in getting receptor reaction than just using the more stable form of CBD or CBDV or any one of these cannabinoids. And the list goes on and on. We're just learning there's 150 of them. So like CBC is one of the newer ones coming to the market. We're just starting to learn a little bit about it, what it does. THCV is another one that is really good, and we grew some of that this year. We're just trying to get through all the regulatory hurdles to be able to share it with everybody eventually. But THCV has the potential to help people with weight loss because of metabolism. It interacts somehow with the blood metabolism systems. They call it skinny weed or weight loss weed. Can also be effective for people with diabetes is some of the early research. The other thing is it has the potential. It is not psychotropic. Doesn't get you high. However, they're saying there's a possibility that it could help with some Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's is really any one of our thoughts or any one of our memories are just neurological pathways through the gray matter. And it's a circuit that has emotion attached to it. And when we choose to go down that pathway, whatever emotion is there is projected in our body and our mind as if we were actually there. That's where people get in their heads and they have PTSD from maybe something that happened in the past, or they have worry and fear of what may happen in the future. And that causes a lot of dysbiosis in the brain where things are imbalanced and we feel anxiety and fight or flight, and we're not fighting or flighting. So everything just kind of builds up. Well, when we take certain cannabinoids, it's trying to de-stress and bring you back into a state of homeostasis. So somebody that's in a real fearful mind and they're able to get some CBD or some CBDA, it allows their thoughts to no longer go down that pathway. Instead, it makes the path of least resistance being in the present moment. So that's truly where we are meant to spend our lives, is in the present moment, because it's the only thing real in our lives. Everything else is just pathways and thoughts and, you know, all of these things going on in our heads. But you take a look at the rest of nature and you don't see animals thinking about yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. We have this free will of thought, and that's what gives us that ability to think. But also, we're not meant to be in a state of stress. You know, we're meant to be happy, joyous, and free. We are, but we don't realize it. So some of these other cannabinoids can really be beneficial both mentally and physically. And as you start to look at what the possibilities are, have an open mind that THC isn't the only thing that makes cannabis what it is. It happens to be a cool thing because a lot of times people are in their life, and when they get high, they can kind of step out of it and look at life from a different point of view, and it can be less stressful because maybe people are just kind of stuck in their life. So it can also be very powerful for enhancing. So if somebody really has, you know, they're doing a lot of meditating and they're able to be in the present moment, and then they use cannabinoids, it can actually take you to a different level because you're not using it just to get to a neutral point. You know, that's the way I look, is that, you know, we as a society are at quite a deficit from where we're supposed to be because of the microbial balance in our gut. There's no doubt in my mind, I've done the research. The microbes in the gut are the key to human health. That's where everything starts. And if we don't get that balance, both physically and mentally, our secondary system is this endocannabinoid system that we can use. And we can now use phytocannabinoids because our bodies, in a lot of cases, aren't even able to produce the endocannabinoids we're capable of. If we don't have enough omega-3 fats in our diet, that is a building block. All of the cannabinoids are lipid-based or oil-based. So if the human body isn't getting enough omega-3 oils, we don't have the building block to start producing the endocannabinoids to begin with. That's where the phytocannabinoids come in, and they can assist us to get us back to a state of homeostasis. It's so profound that not only do they work on the human body, but it's all interactive. We're a superorganism. When one thing shifts, all the other systems are part of it. All the microbes, like when you take CBD, and if you have celiac disease, which is a autoimmune, it's an issue that you don't have the proper gut lining. When CBD is administered, it interacts with the microbes in the gut and actually causes a relief from some of the symptoms associated with that. Why? Because we are a complete system. When we do something, we're affecting the whole environment, not just affecting one little part. That's the beauty of what these cannabinoids can do. And as we learn more, I mean, we're just learning about the microbes. We're just learning about the reality of what the human body can do, both mentally and physically. And it's all new science. And right now, we're in a great position because we can take these tools, start to incorporate them into our life, and be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem that we see out there. Because if we're in a state of stress, if we're in a state of worry, we can't help look at what the possible outcomes can be. And there's many. I mean, we're never really given a problem in nature without giving a solution. When COVID hit, everybody's looking for a cure. Yeah, they synthesized one. But we also found out that a cannabinoid could potentially have the human body fight that off. CBGA was one of the ones that some of the research showed. And again, nothing is just cut and dry because we're all different too. My microbes are different today than they were at any other time in my life, and they won't be this way ever again because they're always changing and everybody else's. Just us meeting in this room, each of us have a 10-foot cloud and all these microbes are exchanging and all these things. And that's really the reality of what we're involved with. So this is what we talked about. Any questions about these? Sativa indica, sativa tends to be more uplifting, very narrow leaves. Indica, very wide leaves. But what we're finding more is that if we harvest early, we get more CBGA here. And CBG is really one of the coolest cannabinoids out there. It's called the stem cell of cannabinoids. Why stem cell? The stem cell in the human body can turn into any part that it needs to. So if it needs to build a bone or a tissue or muscle, it could do that. Stem cell can be multi-purpose. CBG turns into one of the other cannabinoids as the plant starts to mature. It's the first cannabinoid that is produced and then morphs into or changes into one of the other cannabinoids. So like one of our varieties that we just harvested last year, the THC level is right around 19–20%. The CBG level is almost 6%, which means that if we left that plant in the sun longer, that CBG would have turned into THC. The THC would have even gone higher. However, it would be more intoxicating, whereas with the G, it's going to be more focused and less lofty. Because what will happen is that you're hitting a combination. Also, because these receptors are in the brain and they only have so much surface area, when we hit multiple cannabinoids on them, it diminishes the effect of just one cannabinoid. So the CBG takes up some of the space, the THC takes up some of the space, CBG is gone, THC hits the whole receptor. So it's more of the entourage effect that we're finding, and that's really what all of the professors, all of the people that were mentors to me, it's the entourage effect that the plant gives you, finding the right one. This gentleman has trouble sleeping, and we're trying to get the right combination to be able to allow the body to be able to get to that state of homeostasis. We found it once with an autoflower, and it seems to be, we're trying to figure that out, because and again, his body is changing, so it might be slightly different, but now we have research, we have some studies that are being done, and we can start to figure out how this stuff all works. All right, any questions on this stuff? Okay, so timing wise, again, with photos, August, right around the 8th. That is when the days get less than 12 hours of sunlight here. So everything before August 8th is going to be vegetation in your photo plants. Once that time frame hits, depending on the cycle for that particular genetics, it'll be anywhere from, could be as low as 7 weeks to as many as 12 weeks before we get the final flower. Okay? And they'll start flowering out shortly after. Again, if it's a 12-week flower, like forbidden, we planted some forbidden seeds last week. We're gonna see how those pop. That plant will not be harvested until Thanksgiving. So that plant will easily get 8 foot tall if we start them this early, 8 foot tall, unless we top them. And next week, we'll start talking about the growth of the plant and how we then start to train it which way we want it to go. Okay? Any other questions here? Any questions anybody's got going on at home that they want to ask about, or? Yeah,
3 of my seats didn't make it show up yet.
didn't show up,
No.
okay. All right, so give me an idea, what'd you do?
And I did exactly what you said. I did the compost. I had one of those, not exactly what you showed.
Like
the
these
cow
kind?
pots, but another kind.
Okay. Okay.
And, I did exactly the 1.1 ounce
Yeah,
and it didn't show.
okay, now is it real dry?
Is it dry? They were in the beginning.
Okay, and then like when you add water,
Mhm.
then you wait about, so what I do is I take and I wrap the whole thing in saran wrap. Okay, and the reason I do that is that this saran wrap for the first 4 or 5 days will keep all that moisture from evaporating out. Okay, and what else it wants is warmth. Probably around 75
thinking-
degrees would be about the best.
It got cold once.
Yeah.
Thinking, once it gets cold, will it be able to germinate again? Or germinate afterwards?
It will continue to germinate. It can germinate. I've had seeds germinate as low as like 45 degrees.
Wow.
They will germinate. What they don't want is too much water, but you can't let them get dry either. Okay? So it's kind of a touchy thing.
Yeah, I'm watching them always. I need to put some water in the tray underneath. So I'm scared to give them too much water.
Right.
Is that a bad thing?
As long as the seed isn't touching that water and it can't leach up to where it's too wet, it should be fine. Okay? This is what we do when we're doing it commercially. We use these, look at that. There's no bottom to them.
Wow.
We fill these up with potting soil. We put the seeds in here. And then we pull them out of here and we transplant them right from here into a pot like this if we're gonna continue to grow indoors. Or if it's an autoflower, we'll go right into the ground with it right away. But we'll do it at a very early age. So these are the plants we planted last week.
No, I came in right away and looked at them.
Yeah.
There's 3 not showing.
Okay, one is still showing here. And I checked there and I didn't see anything breaking there and I didn't see anything. I did see one coming here. Looks like I planted these a little too deep. That's probably what hurt them.
That's what happened. 2 of them.
Yeah, sometimes when you water, it'll drive the seed too low. That's one of the errors I find.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it'll drive it a little low. So now we could bury this whole container right in the ground because the root will come right through it and this is compost. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you what it looks like at this stage. And I always like to use a fork to do this because it works the best. And this will give you a good idea of where we are. There is your plant right there. Okay, so it's got a tiny little root cone. You take that, dig a hole here, put that right in there. Like that. Get a little bit of water anyway. Too much, just enough to give it a touch. It's as simple as a transplant is in there, just leave it alone. And then light, we don't want to have too much light. If you're using any kind of lights, plants are young, they don't want too much light. The best thing to be would be to get a light meter. I've got one in the kitchen. Let me grab it. I forgot to bring one. So this is a light meter that you can buy on Amazon. They're about 35 bucks. What they do is they give you a reading for the light. And as you get closer to the light, the reading will go higher. Yeah. It's very sensitive. Distance drops it down. And then what you do is when you're growing your plants, so like here is extremely low light. And we're still getting very low light here. So what I will do is these plants, I will be taking in the hoop house that we have in the back, and I'll be growing them there because I don't want to put an artificial light up here. But if I did, I would get an artificial light and I would dim it down. But because I have a hoop house, it's got beautiful sunlight coming in all the time. It's over 12 hours of daylight. So I'll take them out there and then I'll bring them in to show us next week where we're at with them. And you can see how they grow. Okay? Yes.
So someone online says, seeds keep curling around like a corkscrew under the soil after she plants them.
Yeah, I get that once in a while. What happens is if the seed is just not right in the hole right, it starts upward, then it starts to go downward, and it's got this bend in it. So it is rare. Let me ask you, is it common practice or is it just once in a while you see it? If we get a response?
She's answering.
Because I had, like we just planted 50 of them and I had 1 out of 50 that had that curl up action.
She said the past 4 seeds.
All 4 seeds. Okay. Then possibly we don't have enough water deep enough that the seed is going deep enough to try to find the water. That's a possibility because it's trying to stay near the surface. But it's not something that I find is a constant problem. But again, I'd like to try to find out a little bit more about the circumstance to get a little bit better feel. But if that seed gets water and it's only a surface watering that we're doing, then the root has no reason to go deep to find its water. And that.
She said the leaves are touching the soil too.
So the leaves actually pop at the.
They must have, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because usually once the leaves open up in the photosynthesis, it usually helps shoot that root down. But again, and water-wise, I do want everybody to think about using water. If you don't have a water filter, take the chlorine out. Take your water, pour it in a container, set it out overnight so all of the chlorine can evaporate out. Because we don't want to use, the chlorine will kill some of the microbes that we want in the soil. Okay, so the plants are at a very early stage here. This is the key time for them to start to build their microbial balance. Just like when we're babies and we are born, we start to build our microbiome over the next 6-month period. Well, over the next 30 days, this plant will get synergistic relationships with microbes that will remain in that relationship for the rest of its life. And if everything is done properly, 2 plants that are planted close by will end up having their mycelium connect, and the plants will be communicating to each other to be able to share nutrients. And the way they also work is that, let's say a Japanese beetle jumps on one plant and starts biting it, that plant can alert other plants in the field so they can start producing the chemicals to fight off those Japanese beetles. So I've seen that in action where you start to see them coming and then 2 days later, you see the Japanese beetle on the leaf and they're chewing away, but it's like armor. They can't even get through it and they get upset and they leave. Yeah. And when I called Cornell and I said, you know, what's going on? You know, this is great. And it was explained to me that the plant adjusts the sugars, and by doing that, they're able to change the taste or the ability for that bug to actually attack. So beautiful the way nature works.
Is that the reason why you like to like plant it and get it where it's gonna be for its entire life and not disturb it so that?
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather do that than a pot, because a pot, everything is an island. The roots might get a little bit in the ground in the bottom of the pot, but you're limited to what's in there. To do a good photo, you should at least have a 40-gallon pot, really. 40 or 50. But going into soil is great, because it can put down that good taproot, it can put down out its roots on the side. So what happened last year is that because we had such a wet year, one of the problems I had was that where my row was gonna be, I ripped the earth to be able to make it easy for the roots to grow. And that acted like a crease that allowed water to come into and stay. So it was a lesson I learned. I will never do that again. Because we want to keep, if I'm going to help that plant, I will go straight down, but I won't make a thing because then the roots can go outside and they won't be so wet. Yeah, be much better. Gentlemen, do you want to see something just pulled up?
The amount of light.
It depends on it should be, again, your lux should be around 190. Okay, that should be plenty of light at the beginning stage. And then you can look at a book and you could see, it'll tell you the different light ranges you want for different stages. Flowering stage, they use a ton. Vegetation, seedling stage is the first stage, very light. Get into veg, and we can start to crank it a little bit, but it still doesn't require as much as when flowering starts. Flowering is where it takes the most intense. And then if you are growing indoor, you can even put underside lighting to be able to get your sides. Now, what I do outdoors, which is extremely helpful, is I use a white fabric to cover the ground. You've seen ground covers where they're black, right? Well, you can get white ones. So what happens, it's permeable, so the water goes through it, but more importantly, when that sun hits it, it's reflecting off. So it was remarkable. The first year I did it, it was all of the buds on the bottom of the plant were as big as the buds on the top of the plant. It was mind-boggling. It actually created a lot of tension between my sons and I because they like to keep everything off the ground. And I saw all these big buds and I said, no, you're not going to take those off. But we ended up compromising and taking some of them off. The problem is if your branches get too heavy and they do lay on the ground, you can get higher bug problems because you're laying close to the earth. With fabric, it makes it a lot better. If you're working with regular soil and you just have the ground there, you definitely want to be careful because anything that touches that ground will then start to bring insects up from the ground. It'll also create a wet environment with powdery mildew can get because you're not going to get air through there. Okay. So keep all those things in mind. So I'm going to show you one more transplant here. We actually have two more to do.
So what's that white fabric called? Just landscape?
Yeah, what I do is there's a place called All Season, and if you go on eBay, that's where I get it. And they have it anywhere from 3 foot all the way up to 12 foot wide. So I would get 12 feet by 300 feet, and we would run that and just take and use a hot knife, electric knife to cut our holes or cut X's where we were putting them. And it was amazing because then you're not working with weed control either. Really nice not to have weeds will keep you busy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the problem with the weeds is that if you start tilling your soil, you can start to hurt some of the root system of the cannabis plant. So the other thing would be planting companion plants. Like one of the ones that we use a lot is buckwheat because the buckwheat throws a shaft up and then it has like a leaf structure up here. So it shadows everything underneath. So the rest of the weeds can't grow and it's kind of nice. So buckwheat, clover, things like that, people will plant if you're going to do companion plant. You can also use spices, which will enhance the terpenes in your weed. Okay, so all of these herbs that have all these medicinal properties. They also are very compatible and synergistic to cannabis as well. Okay. So we're gonna pop this one in here again. Little root structure. Cool. And we got it. There she is, just a tiny root, nice and early. Get right in there. Give it a little water right away. What I'm using here is I'm using a soil mixture, which is just a potting soil that really is like a neutral base. And then I add some compost and mix that together. So it's got all the nutrition it's going to need. The compost also brings in a lot of microbes because compost is broken down. Usually worms, worm castings are in there. This has all of those. Worms have about 1,700 different varieties of bacteria in their gut. So when we get the worm castings, we get the benefit of all that. Okay. So we're kind of at the end of the time here, but I'm here to answer any additional questions we have, and then we're going to do it again next week. And then in May, we're going to start doing some health talks too. That'll be based on a lot to do with microbes and all about health. There's a lot of interest in that, and I don't want to take away from this class by getting waylaid into that. But that's truly a passion of mine because the more that I see people with different issues, we're finding that it all starts in the gut. Everything from Parkinson's to seizures, all of these systems that are out of whack. We're able to use cannabinoids, or we're able to, if we keep this in balance throughout our whole life, then those things don't start to show. It's said that Alzheimer's can be found in the gut years before the symptoms actually show themselves. Same thing with Parkinson's, same thing with a lot of these different things. And it's just lack of awareness. It would be like not understanding how to farm a field, and it just goes fallow and everything just starts growing and bushes grow and all this stuff grows, and you think, oh, I got a beautiful, but you don't. It's not manageable. It's not productive. And that's what we need to learn. If we learn that, then we can learn how we're supposed to live, which is very healthy. We're supposed to live long and die quickly. That's supposed to die slowly over time. We're supposed to be functional right up until the day we're done. But until we learn how to do that, we have to deal with some of the symptoms that we see in medical industry calls it dis-ease. I call it imbalances. And I believe they all start in the gut. And then our secondary system is the endocannabinoid to try to balance it. And then we treat symptoms with drugs. The problem is it can affect other things. Like whenever you hear those commercials, they tell you the good thing, and then they tell you and other things that can be side effects. And you read some of those, yeah, I got rid of my inflammation, but I have suicidal thoughts. That's great. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and hopefully the weather turns here soon, and we can do more outdoors. But we'll be planting these plants, and after the 4-week period, we'll start another class, because as the plants start growing more, we'll keep classes so that we can keep learning as we go. But don't be afraid. There's nothing mystique about growing weed. Almost anybody can grow it. To grow really good stuff just takes a lot of having a relationship with a plant. I have relationships with plants. When I came to tomatoes and I started growing tomatoes, I want to know everything about them. I understood the difference between determinant and indeterminate and how you prune them and everything. And the same thing with the cannabis plant. It's like a hobby. You get to learn a lot, and it teaches you a lot. And then it's your own medicine. And it also has a DNA connection to us, meaning that when people start growing this plant, they just it's almost like they fall in love with it because of the way that it turns our switches on. It smells, the cannabinoids, every part of it. It's so beautiful, because this one lady came in a couple of years ago, and we had this beautiful flower that we grew, a nice hemp flower. And she came in and she, wow, what's that beautiful smell? And we showed it to her. Wow, I love it. I would just like to have that at home. And a lot of people just think it stinks, but to each their own. It's our bodies, I think they're just amazing plants. I think they're great. They're a gift to us all, and now it's not illegal. So we're good. Just an update on where we're at with our license. Our last contact with the OCM office was on March 26th, when they asked us what hours we were gonna be open. And we told them, and then the April meeting came and we weren't on the list. And they won't give us a status. They don't do that to anybody. It's like, the state just is really difficult to work with. I heard a lot of people saying that all along, and I've never been involved with anything where no communication. I don't, you can't get answers. Crazy. So I'm dealing with a lab, and if I have this one variety of cannabis and I want to put it in 1/8 of an ounce containers, I have to get a lab test. If I want to put it in 1/4 ounce containers, the same batch, I have to get another lab test. However, I can ask them if they will do a parent sibling where they do the one big test here and then they just do microbials on the other ones. So I sent them an email with my testing lab last week. Each test, by the way, is $750. Okay? So the one variety I did in 4, it was $3,000 just for test, put it in 4. I said, I'm gonna try this other thing to save some money. So they said, yep, we received your report. We'll be back to you Friday, end of business. Friday, end of business, nothing came. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't receive anything. Monday, they said, other priorities came back. We'll get back to you soon. That was Monday. Today's what, Tuesday? So that's what we're dealing with, and it's unfortunate, but out of my hands, out of my control.
When we start selling, do we have to have a license or anything?
To
To
sell,
buy?
Yeah, what is the
To-
phone
To
call?
buy? From you?
to buy weed?
Yeah.
So I have to have a license to sell it to you, and I have to collect
You can sell it
taxes.
to anyone.
I can sell to anybody that's over 21 years old once I have my license. And that's the only thing, is gotta be 21 years old. No other stipulations. Yeah.
Scan our license.
No, you just look at them for age proof. Sometimes we'll do that because then it captures all the information, and I'm not even sure, because we have the software ready to go, but it's like, we're just waiting for them to tell us what's next. We'll have to get an ATM in here because you can't use Visa cards, but you can use debit cards. Yeah.
Will
It's
you
pretty
be
well.
able to sell the seeds?
Seeds are gonna be very difficult, so Singer Farm Naturals, I still have some seeds there, and I'm gonna be very careful, but we'll do it there. Definitely not here.
And how do you determine what seed to buy based on cannabinoids? Where do you find your research?
So like, so many sources, like Leafy is one of them. And if you say, you're looking for a particular terpene, you can find varieties that have certain terpenes. So depending on what you're looking for.
How do you determine the plants that you're growing so far? How do you pick those? How do you determine which ones you want to grow?
How do I do it? So
What are you
I'm
looking for, I guess, in the plant?
so like an example is I had to decide what I'm gonna grow for this season. So I plan on growing 6 main varieties. One of them is called garlic berry, which is 50% THC and 50% THCV. I want to grow that one because it's very focused and it's really a new cannabinoid. I'm growing one of the old ones I grew, which is called Snow G, which is in the more of the indica family, but a very, very high producing resinous flower. For people that want a higher THC level, pretty good high THC level. We're growing another one, which is like a sativa, but it's train wreck, but it's a cross that is earlier in maturity. So that'll be a sativa type I'm growing there. Doing another one called Private Party, which is a triploid. Now, a triploid means that they've crossed this plant to the point that it is now a seedless plant. It cannot get pregnant. Therefore, the way the plant grows is that it will grow and take up 25% more nutrients and have flowers that should be 25% bigger than what a normal flower would be without those genetics. They're called triploids. Matter of fact, I think we heard about company out of California that sells a lot of seeds, Humboldt, came out with a triploid. They were selling them for like 10 or 15 bucks a seed. You know? So when I'm buying these better genetics and I'm buying 100 at a time, it's about $5 a seed. Okay, that's when you're buying a large number. Normally with the public, it might be $10 to $15 a seed for some.
So where would somebody buy seeds, just wanted to try it, where would you buy seeds from?
So the place that I get mine is GTR. Okay, and seeds can be pretty well bought by anybody today because they're not federally illegal because they don't have more than 0.3 THC.
I'm curious, when you're trying to help someone figure out what type of flower might be better to use or plant. So I'm an acupuncturist and know lots of alternative practitioners who use kinesiology. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Muscle testing to
Yeah,
see what.
And I
was
do
just
know
curious.
some people that take my CBD products and they do that with the actual tinctures and gummies and they can
Yeah.
feel if their body accepts them better. Yeah, yeah, we've had people do that with the actual tinctures. I have one gal in Clarence that's a homeopath, and she will take the different tincture bottles or different gummies and then put it in their hand and be able to feel if their body is weaker or stronger, if it's compatible. So it's a science that, there's a lot we don't know about. There's more we don't know about than what we do know about. And that's what I'm learning. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. Yeah. It's a beautiful world out there. We get stuck with these preconceived thoughts of how everything is, and we're kind of brainwashed because nobody really knew. But we are superorganisms. We have this amazing ability that we can change how we feel, how our health is, just by changing the food stock coming in and the probiotics that you have in it. It's just amazing. It's really cool. You try all these other routes, traditional medicine, they give you this and that drug, and then you just change the microbes and it's like they produce it for you. You got your own pharmaceutical company. That's what microbes are. The pharmaceutical companies, and you can have an army of them inside of you, or you can have an army of parasites living inside of you that are taking and sapping the life right out of you, because that's what they do. Yeah, I love talking about microbes. Okay, anything else? All right. Well, if you think of anything, jot it down for next week. And if something's bothering you during the week and you got problems, give a call here and I'll return a call. So if you're stuck, don't be stuck. If you need to bring something in for me to see it, give a holler and then I can look at something to try to help you from that point of view. So you're not alone in this, okay? Good.